completely fucked up.
Hello and welcome to Destination Truth. Tonight I have an important story about Spain and Catalonia. So over the weekend, another crazy story other than the Las Vegas shooting happened. And it happened in Catalonia, where a referendum was held, a vote to see if they should in fact want to be, basically it's just two questions. There's, do you want to be sovereign from Spain? And would you like to be a separate nation if you were sovereign? Basically, it's like, would you like to be a Scotland to the UK? Or would you like to be a Northern Ireland, or like completely separate yourselves? Why does this story matter so much? Well, it is a perfect example of what's going on in America, really. There is a war on the middle class, and Catalonians, as we know, are on average a little bit more intelligent, but most importantly, they earn more than most of Spain per capita. They earn more. And they are also the most highly taxed region, or one of the most highly taxed regions in Europe. So basically, the country is leeching off of this region. So they are, in fact, just like us Americans and most of the world, debt slaves. And the rest of the country, or just like the, unfortunately, the leeches or the parasites that our country has that leech upon the middle class. And of course, I say only the middle class because the top 1% of the country that earns the most have already exempted themselves through loopholes that they themselves are able to legislate and create, such as tax-free foundations. Just look at the Rockefellers, for example. They themselves, as a family, earn enough to basically negate almost the entire country's debt. And of course they don't. And they have more money than God, basically. And yet, when they actually do income tax, they only owe a few $100 to $1,000 worth in taxes. Makes no sense. Go to any museum, just about any museum in America, big one, any big museum, and you'll see a ton of artwork dedicated or gifted to the museum by the Rockefellers. Anyways, they have insane wealth. In Catalonia, you see not just this giant disparity of wealth basically being taken out of Catalonia and given to the rest of the country, which is not fair. Simply put, it's not fair. Not only is it that, but Catalonia honestly deserves its own sovereignty. It was only taken from them about 400 years ago. For that, they were their own people. And they still are today. That's the crazy thing. Even though their fascist dictator governments have outlawed them to be themselves. And what do I mean by this? I didn't know this till recently, but basically Catalonia speaks their own language, has their own culture, has obviously their own history, but the fact that they used to have their own language and only speak in that language is astonishing. And recently, they have, over the last 100 years or so, gone back to it. After the dictatorships have ended, like the Franco dictatorship, they've been allowing themselves to go back to Catalonian and speak the language again, even though for the longest time it was outlawed to do anything in public. No movies, no operas, no plays, no books, no radio, music. Nothing was allowed to be in their native language, Catalonian. It was effectively outlawed. Now, sometimes people think that things can't be changed by government just because government says so, but I assure you, you are very wrong. Let's use Russia as an example, because I have been to Russia, and I've lived in Russia. Many times over, there were 5-year plans in Russia, and in these 5-year plans, they did drastic changes. Some of them were literally changing words. They're saying, this word is no longer usable. You cannot use this word. The word tovarish, for example, is one of many words to use to say the word comrade. But that's a newer word. There's a much older word that was outlawed apparently. Weren't supposed to use it. It's bizarre, I know, but it happened. Now, my last note I want to make about the situation in Catalonia is I find it very sad that they are in the situation they're in because they're a smaller region, much smaller, about the size of 10% of the country, I would say, but they could easily make up their own country with Barcelona being their capital. The only thing is, Spain has already made it very difficult for those people to get firearms. So what do you think is going to happen? They can pretend to have democracy, but it is still a very top-down dictator type government. It's definitely more socialist. Thing is, when you're debt slaves, a socialist government starts acting a lot more like a dictatorship anytime its people get out of hand. So, it's also in their constitution that their government and their land will stay together now. So their army, it's in the law that their army is allowed to get involved if there's any risk of separatism in their country. So their main military is allowed to fight in any civil war. So that small region, unfortunately, will really have to take some blows if they ever truly want to be sovereign, which is very sad because they will get massacred probably. A lot of people believe in democracy there still, but I assure you from the bottom of my heart, they will have to have a very, very long civil war again if Catalonia ever wants to truly be sovereign and free of the tax parasites of the rest of their country. And I hope they do someday, but until that day, they need to continue doing the referendums and trying to be free. But yeah, democracy in that situation is not going to be enough. What you need is a Second Amendment right like every American has. A freedom to bear arms. And in the face of a dictator type government that will not let you have your freedoms, then you take your freedom back.